So everything in AI has a struggle between Google and NVIDIA. And Google has a TPU, NVIDIA has their GPUs, and Google only has a TPU and they use a bunch of other chips for networking. NVIDIA has the full stack. And Blackwell was delayed. Blackwell was NVIDIA's next generation chip. And the first iteration of that was the Blackwell 200. A lot of different SKUs were canceled. And the reason for that is it was by far the most complex product transition we've ever gone through in technology. Going from Hopper to Blackwell, first you go from air-cooled to liquid-cooled. The rack goes from weighing round numbers 1,000 pounds to 3,000 pounds. Goes from round numbers 30 kilowatts, which is 30 American homes, to 130 kilowatts, which is 130 American homes. So I analogize it to imagine if to get a new iPhone, you had to change all the outlets in your house to 220 volt, put in a Tesla Powerwall, put in a generator, put in solar panels, that's the power, put in a whole home humidification system, and then reinforce the floor because the floor can't handle this. So it was a huge product transition. And then just the rack was so dense, it was really hard for them to get the heat out. So Blackwells have only really started to be deployed in really scaled deployments over the last 3 or 4 months. So I think, Google for sure has this temporary advantage right now from a pre-training perspective. I think it's also important that they've been the lowest cost producer of tokens, okay? And this is really important because AI is the first time in my career as a tech investor that being the low-cost producer has ever mattered. Apple is not worth trillions because they're the low-cost producer of phones. Microsoft is not worth trillions because they're the low-cost producer of software. NVIDIA is not worth trillions because they're the low-cost producer of AI accelerators. It's never mattered. And this is really important because what Google has been doing as the low-cost producer is they have been, I would say, sucking the economic oxygen out of the AI ecosystem, which is an extremely rational strategy for them. And for anyone who's the low-cost producer, let's make life really hard for our competitors. And so what happens now? I think this has pretty profound implications. One, we will see the first models trained on Blackwell in early 2026.
Yep.
I think the first Blackwell model will come from xAI. And the reason for that is according to Jensen, no one builds data centers faster than Elon.
Yes.
Jensen has said this on the record. Even once you have the Blackwells, it takes 6 to 9 months to get them performing at the level of Hopper. Because the Hopper is finely tuned. Everybody knows how to use it. The software is perfect for it. The engineers know all its quirks. Everybody knows how to architect a Hopper data center at this point. And by the way, when Hopper came out, it took 6 to 12 months for it to really outperform Ampere, which was the generation before. So if you're Jensen or NVIDIA, you need to get as many GPUs deployed in one data center as fast as possible in a coherent cluster so you can work out the bugs. And so this is what xAI effectively does for NVIDIA. Because they build the data centers the fastest, they can deploy Blackwells at scale the fastest, and they can help work with NVIDIA to work out the bugs for everyone else. So because they're the fastest, they'll have the first Blackwell model. We know that scaling laws for pre-training are intact, and this means the Blackwell models are going to be amazing. Blackwell is, it's not an F35 versus an F4 Phantom, but from my perspective, it is a better chip. Maybe it's like an F35 versus a Raphael. And so now that we know pre-scaling laws are holding, we know that these Blackwell models are going to be really good. Yeah. And, kind of based on the raw specs, they should probably be better. And then something even more important happens. So the GB200 was really hard to get it going. The GB300 is a great chip. It is drop-in compatible in every way with those GB200 racks. Now, you're not going to replace the GB200s.
No new power walls, yeah.
Yeah, just any data center that can handle those. You can slot in the GB300s, and now everybody's good at making those racks, and you know how to get the heat out, you know how to cool them. You're going to put those GB300s in, and then the companies that use the GB300s, they're going to be the low-cost producer of tokens, particularly if you're vertically integrated. If you're paying a margin to someone else to make those tokens, you're probably not going to be. I think this has pretty profound implications because I think it has to change Google's strategic calculus. If you have a decisive cost advantage and you're Google and you have search and all these other businesses, why not run AI at a negative 30% margin. It is by far the rational decision. You take the economic oxygen out of the environment. You eventually make it hard for your competitors who need funding, unlike you, to raise the capital they need. And then on the other side of that, maybe you have an extremely dominant share position. Well, all that calculus changes once Google is no longer the low-cost producer, which I think will be the case. The Blackwells are now being used for training. And then when that model is trained, then you start shifting Blackwell clusters over to inference. And then all these cost calculations and these dynamics change. And I do think it's very interesting. Like during the strategic and economic calculations between the players, I've never seen anything like it. You know, everyone understands their position on the board, what the prize is, you know, what play their opponents are running. And it's really interesting to watch. So I just think if Google changes its behavior, because it's going to be really painful for them as a higher cost producer to run that negative 30% margin, it might start to impact, you know, their stock. That has pretty profound implications for the economics of AI. And then when Rubin comes out, we'll know the gap is going to expand significantly.
Versus TPUs?
Versus TPUs and all other ASICs.